For the past 3 decades, as storms raged and communities braced for impact, one meteorologist was headed toward the action.
We were in the eye wall for 5+ hours. The wind was just howling. It sounded like a hornet's nest.
Mike Seidel has braved the elements, staring down hurricanes, blizzards, and everything in between, all to bring viewers life-saving information and a front-row seat to nature's most awe-inspiring performances.
When you get into weather like that, there is a lot of adrenaline.
Whether he's been battered by 100-mile-per-hour winds, drenched by sideways rain, or struggling to keep his footing on a frozen landscape, Mike Seidel has always been there, a reassuring presence guiding us through the storm.
The winds were gusting over 50 miles an hour, and we're getting snowfall rates at 2 inches an hour.
After 32 years and 25,000 live shots, Mike is hanging up his weather gear. This week, we are going off the radar with the legendary meteorologist to explore his unforgettable encounters with extreme weather.
It's hard to imagine you're fighting that wind all day into the evening, and then the next day you wake up and you could feel it.
The moments that went viral.
Then all of a sudden, within 20 minutes online, people were saying it looked like I was peeing on national TV.
And a career dedicated to helping communities prepare for nature's fury. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do. Hi, everyone. First off, I want to say a big hello to all of our new listeners because there are many of you. I want to give a big shout out to my colleagues at Sinclair, especially Manny Fantis. With their support, the downloads on this podcast have skyrocketed. You guys especially loved the episode on turbulence, so I'm actually working on a follow-up episode on that topic. I'm pretty pumped about some other upcoming episodes. Leading up to the release of Twisters next month, there's a very special episode that I'll be talking to an actor that starred in the original Twister movie back in 1996. I also have an upcoming episode that deconstructs the weather at the Battle of Gettysburg. But today's episode is pretty special too. As you know, it's officially hurricane season, and today's guest has covered over 100 of these storms live on television. He's a friend of mine, someone that has been a great mentor in my career, meteorologist Mike Seidel. Now, I met Mike about 20 years ago when I was a lowly weather producer at the Weather Channel. And when I left there and went to Maryland, I saw him every time he drove over the Bay Bridge because he'd call me and say, "Hey, Emily, where are we eating?" Now, as you may have heard, there's been some change in Mike's employment in the past month or so. The Weather Channel went through a round of layoffs due to budget cuts, and for the first time in 32 years, Mike was no longer an employee of the company. While this is sad news for many, including Mike himself, he's also excited about the time he gets to relax now and for whatever may be in store for him next. I was excited because it meant that he could also be a guest on the podcast. Now, Mike's going to share all about his extensive history as a live shot reporter for the Weather Channel. He has some great stories, and I can't wait for you to hear them. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please subscribe to Off the Radar. Enjoy this conversation with Mike Seidel. I'm so thrilled to talk to you because you have a huge amount of experience when it comes to hurricanes, and we're just kind of getting into the hurricane season here. And so I'm looking forward to picking your brain a little bit about live shots and hurricanes and what you've seen over the years. But I want to start by going way back to the beginning of how you became a meteorologist, like your interest in weather and where you're from and all that. So can you give me a little brief background on you?
Sure. I'll just read my Wikipedia. Anyway. Well, I grew up on the Maryland-Delaware coast, and as you know, on the ocean, and we tend to get those storms, those nor'easters, and even tropical weather, hurricanes and tropical storms. Although we never had anything that directly hit us when I was growing up in the 60s and into the 70s. And it was kind of like a hobby. I started measuring snow at 6 years old. I still have those snow measurements on old pieces of paper. And it grew into a hobby and a real interest. So I got my first weather station in 8th grade and put that up on the top of the 3rd floor of the roof. And I recorded high and low temps and rainfall, snowfall for 10 years in the 70s before I went away to grad school at Penn State. So really mushroomed into that. And as far as broadcasting, I got into radio when I was 16 at a small AM station in town. And that really was a forerunner of, talking on TV and ad-libbing, because radio back in those days, small market radio, was just ad-lib. So it really forced you to learn how to ad-lib and not stumble and talk properly. So that was certainly a good thing. And then after Penn State and my master's, I got my first full-time TV job in Greenville, South Carolina. Now, in the summers, when I was getting my master's degree, I went back home and actually ended up working full-time pretty much at a new local TV station, because the previous meteorologist left in June and I filled in till the latter part of August. And that happened 2 summers in a row, in 81 and 82. So they gave me some good on-air experience. At Penn State, I did Weather World, which is broadcast across the state on PBS, or was at that point. And then I went to Greenville, was there for about 5 years.
Okay, so then the Weather Channel from there. So how did that happen? How did you go from having your first job to then jumping to the Weather Channel?
Well, I kept sending tapes down to Atlanta, and then finally they called me in for an interview in January of 1992. And then I got the offer, and I started on March 9th, 1992.
Wow, good memory.
Until the last day of April of 2024. So it's 32 years and almost 2 months. So it was a long time. And so now I'm out looking ahead to see what I can do. I'm not sure if I really want to work full time again, but I certainly entertain the thought of doing some more storm coverage, especially with this outrageous hurricane season that's being forecasted by
that outlook that came out
and CSU and other outlets. So we'll see how that pans out. Right now, I'm just enjoying the downtime and the free time. And I was literally on call 24/7 for so many years, and trying to make plans for 4 or 5 days in advance I could make plans, but you just never know with the weather. Sometimes sometimes you don't know till the day before. And then when you get out there, you're not sure when you're going to come back sometimes. Sometimes it's a 3-day trip. When you get out there and the hurricane hits and there's aftermath coverage, and you could be out, as much as a week or more. So this is a nice change from being on call and waiting to see if I had to hit the road, head to the airport, and fly somewhere.
Okay, so when you started the Weather Channel, did you immediately start doing live shots, or was that something that kind of developed over the years?
Oh, yeah, that developed later. I started in 92 in the studio, and then my first live trip was Hurricane Edouard, which was Labor Day weekend of 1996, Cape Cod, and I went up there, and then after that, they kept using me more and more. And believe it or not, we didn't even cover winter weather until January of 96. So that was, that was the early stages of live coverage. Back then, we were just basically covering tropical storms and hurricanes. And in the winter of 96, we added in winter coverage, and they saw how good the ratings were, and they just started doing it. And then from that point on, I was doing studio and live coverage until about 2010. And since 2010, the last 14 years, I was exclusively doing field coverage and not in the studio. In fact, I gave away half my suits recently.
When you and I worked together, you were still in the studio, because I remember you would come in with your suit and your sneakers. You always had on your sneakers.
Well, that's what everybody wears now. I just started the trend.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, people do.
What years you were there in
04, 05?
Right, 04, 05. Yes, I was still studio at that point, still working. But most of my studio work was in the evenings and at night.
Yeah. So that adds up. How many live shots do you think you did?
Well, I've added them up. It's 25,379, I believe. That counts all live shots with the Weather Channel. And then I did a lot of network shots because before we were sold to NBC, Comcast, Bain, and Blackstone, I was doing shots for ABC and CBS and cable networks. And then once we were sold and we were owned by them for about 9 years, I did a lot of shots for the NBC platforms, including the Today Show, NBC Nightly News, and also a lot of shots for MSNBC, their cable channel. So it all adds up to over 25,000 live shots. And that's a lot of live shots. And that doesn't count as lives. As you know, when you finish a shift, they'll have you record what we call an as live that runs later. And interestingly enough, I was like I was in an airport, and I'd pop up on the TV and people would be sitting there next to me and look at me, and I look at the TV and I have to explain to them that's not my twin brother. That's actually me. That was recorded 2 or 3 hours ago. I mean, it freaks them out that they see me in person, and then they see me on TV, and then, well, they're like, what's going on?
So when you got to a location, were people like, oh, we better get out of here. We better leave town because Seidel's here covering a hurricane. That means it's coming this way.
They see the Weather Channel there, especially back early on in the 90s before the internet really took shape and everybody had access to the latest weather information. So back in the day, we'd show up and people may not really know what was coming. Certainly, they're not as informed as they are today with social media and the instantaneous exchange of weather information and news. Now they know, oh, it's coming. They're looking at the Hurricane Center track just like we are. But back 25, 30 years ago, it was a lot different. In fact, I think other networks would look to see where we were and sometimes place their people where we were. But these days, it's there's no secrets out there, really.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that as far as, when people are covering hurricanes, something that you guys always had over everybody else was it's this team of meteorologists covering hurricanes, whereas a lot of other networks are sending reporters. So can you tell me, over the years, have you seen differences in how coverage is based on that background in weather?
Or, the advantage of being a meteorologist, Emily, is the fact that you have the science background. And for those of us who have done live coverage, I've been out in, I think now it's 102 tropical storms and hurricanes. So you have that experience. I mean, the first thing you worry about is your safety and your crew's safety and try to find, obviously, a good, compelling live shot. For instance, in Ian, we knew it was going to be a very bad hurricane. And so we set up at the Marriott there near the causeway over to Fort Myers Beach. And there was no way we were going to be on Fort Myers Beach because they were going to get a 10+ foot surge. And it was really a death wish. So we set up there. It's a big, sturdy, solid 7 or 8 story building. And we rode that out. And it was very impressive being in the eye wall for 5+ hours. But we knew we were safe, and we knew the only issue we'd have is that the hotel would be surrounded by water for a period of time when Ian came in and made landfall. Other than that, there was no other issues. A couple windows got blown out, and the hotel lost some stucco. But when we go out, we always try to find a place to keep the crew safe and myself safe, and then try to get a really good shot. But if we know it's going to be too dangerous, we pull back from the coast, for instance, in a hurricane situation. In tornadoes, we always set up, usually at a hotel that has, if it doesn't have a basement, it has the interior hallways under the stairwells. So we have a safe place to drop back to because of lightning. So many times when we're covering severe weather, we are at a hotel that we're staying at. And that gives us protection and gives us, obviously, the bathroom and everything else. When we're doing snowstorms, because we don't need the protection as far as life-threatening weather, we can set up pretty much anywhere. Get some nice beauty shots of like downtown skylines, or I've done sledding hills, I've done ski resorts, but there's not nearly the risk to the crew when you're doing a snowstorm versus a severe threat, tornado threat, and a hurricane threat. And people always ask me what's the most dangerous weather I've ever been, or the most dangerous weather that I'm worried about. And it's always lightning, because sometimes lightning can literally come out of nowhere. We had an instance, tropical storms in the Gulf. I was on the river Mobile out on I-10, and this cell came up the river, and there had been no lightning. Then all of a sudden, it put down a bolt right behind me in the river, and we hightailed it for the satellite truck. But as far as hurricanes, you can evacuate, you can get away from the surge, you can get inside from the wind. Severe weather, we just drop back into a safe place at the hotel. And with snowstorms, it's usually you don't have to do anything. In all the coverage snowstorms, you can actually have some lighter moments and laugh and play with kids and go down the hill and sled. I did that this winter up in Massachusetts, and it offers a chance to have some fun versus the more serious weather of severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, and hurricanes.
Yeah, I mean, 25,000 live shots. It's ridiculous. I think about like when I worked at a Fox station and I would have like 30 live shots through a morning. That felt like so many. And thinking of something new to do for each live shot was really difficult. So how did you keep it fresh? Like after all those live shots, do you ever get bored? Like, all right, I'm talking about the same thing over and over again.
Well, you have to remember the audience on the Weather Channel changes a lot. And I'm sure they understand if there's no new information about the hurricane incoming, except for the update every 6 hours from the NHC, the National Hurricane Center, that a lot of what I say is going to be the same. And I try to mix it up, but you only have so much information. Mm-hmm. You're out on the beach, you're 2 days from landfall, the sun is out, and about all you can do is tell them what we expect to happen. And it's hard to change that, but that's just the nature of the beast. If you're doing 3 or 4 live shots per hour, it's just hard to come up with new information. So the really sometimes the hardest thing is at the third or fourth hour, trying to hold on to your energy and your passion, and trying not to start to talk like this, because you've been saying the same thing kind of over and over. But that's what separates someone who is good or not so good. Because you can't come on there and just sound bored, then the viewers are going to be bored. So you have to come on there and, have some passion without, my senses go out there. I was more of a nuts and bolts reporter. I had passion and energy, but I never wanted to oversell it. I didn't want to really scare people. That's what you can give the viewers, give them the best information, the latest information, and then do it again 15 minutes later and 15 minutes after that.
Okay,
show maybe a different part of the beach.
Yeah.
I also try to, we try to interview folks out there. Are you planning to leave town, or are you going to ride it out? Have you ever been through something like this? And try to get as they say, the cliche, the mood of the people on the air.
So logistics, any like words of wisdom as far as like preparing for a trip to cover a hurricane or any weather, like snacks or gear, anything you learned over the years that like really helped you survive kind of these long days?
Well, one thing you don't want to do is get wet, especially in the winter. So, I'll always wear plenty of layers. And the other thing about the winter, you never want to be cold and wet. So I wear plenty of layers. I probably in the winter overdress. It's not like I'm breaking a sweat over underneath my layers, but when I'm out there in wind chills of below zero, I probably feel it on my exposed skin, my face, but the rest of me is pretty toasty warm. I'm not feeling it, and that's the way it should be when you're out in that kind of very cold weather, susceptible to frostbite with those very cold sub-zero wind chills. So you will layer up and take it as it is, and try to drink a lot of water, whether it's cold weather or warm weather or hot weather. Always got to stay hydrated. Otherwise, you can get yourself in trouble. I always have something in the bag, maybe a banana or a granola bar. In the warmer months of the year, I've got my rain gear, try to stay as dry as possible. Sometimes when you're out in the throes of a tropical storm, because with a tropical storm, you have a better opportunity to be out in the wind and rain and be safe, unlike a hurricane with stronger winds and the risk of a surge. And sometimes it's hard to stay dry. You're just getting, whacked by gusts of 50 or 60 and, like a car wash force rainfall. And it's hard to get around not going in after your shift and not being wet. But you do the best you can and prepare. That's the best thing, especially in the winter. You do not want to go outside in, frostbite type temperatures without being layered up and covering as much skin as you can. Otherwise, you will be miserable and you can end up with frostbite.
Any live shots or certain weather events really stand out to you that you definitely remember they were impactful, whether there's like a funny thing or a crazy thing or even a traumatic thing?
Well, certainly the one hurricane that's going to stand out for me is just a couple of years ago, Hurricane Ian, because it was such a major force, and the speed. I said earlier, we were in the eye wall for 5+ hours. The wind was just howling. It sounded like a hornet's nest. and we had some really good live shots, and we were playing it safe. We started off down by the river, over to the pool, portico, and then we ended up in my third floor room shooting off the balcony, which was an amazing shot. So that really stands out. The other one was Hurricane Floyd, which I was in the eye of back on, I think it was September 16th, 1999, as it came in over Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach. So those are the two others. Now, I've been in, like I said, over 100 storms and hurricanes. There are others. Also, Katrina. I was in Mobile when it came in. It was pretty wild there. And we had 8 feet of water downtown. The next morning, we went to Long Beach, Mississippi, which was literally washed away because they had a 25-plus foot storm surge, highest on record. And there's so many other examples. As far as snowstorms, the one in February of 2013, I was in Eastern Massachusetts at Revere Beach, and it was the longest shift I've worked. I worked from 4 p.m. Friday to 10 a.m. Saturday morning, 18 hours nonstop. I did live shots every half an hour more for the Weather Channel. I did NBC Nightly News, which was quite a wild shot because I had a flag behind me that was stiff, and it looked like the flag was on the moon, and because it was like this. Yeah. And oh gosh, so many blizzards and snowstorms that I could talk about, but sometimes they begin to run together after so many years. But I can remember the blizzard in Duluth, where you couldn't see me. Even a couple of years ago, I can tell you this. It was Friday, December 23rd, 2022. I was up in Holland, Michigan on the lake, and we had this flash freeze, this cold front that impacted so many people all the way to Texas, all the way to the East Coast. And we had a snowstorm and then the lake effect. And I remember my photographer, Matt Safer, he couldn't even see, he couldn't see me beyond about 15 or 20 yards. I had to come closer. I would just disappear into the white abyss. Keep in mind, the winds were gusting over 50 miles an hour, and we're getting snowfall rates at 2 inches an hour. So that's another memorable winter storm up there. I mean, the wind was just coming right off Lake Michigan. It was incredible.
Was it ever emotionally draining to be at natural disasters and kind of see the aftermath of how people were affected?
Well, that's probably the least favorite part of my work, was covering aftermath from tornadoes. In fact, my last trip was in Elkhorn, Nebraska. The fortunate thing there is that the tornado hit around 3:45 in the afternoon on a weekday, and nobody was home. In fact, we only found one couple that was at home, and outside of a few scratches, nobody was killed or seriously injured. So that was kind of a happy ending, although there was a tremendous amount of damage. And I commented on the air, it was the biggest turnout I'd ever seen in cleanup on that Saturday. Granted, it was a Saturday, but literally hundreds of people showed up to help their neighbors and friends, people they didn't even know, clean up the mess. But when you go into a place like Moore, Oklahoma, after a 5, an EF5, and there's been a lot of death, and people have lost their homes, it can get to you. You just have to kind of deal with it the best you can. But like I said, that's probably the worst part of all the live coverage I did, was going in after a devastating hurricane or a tornado and talk to people who have lost everything. At least they didn't lose their lives. That's the most important thing. But you look at their house, it's gone, it's flattened, they have to rebuild. And, there are more than a few people, they don't have homeowners insurance. So they're basically, they have nothing at that point. And as you can imagine, it can get very emotional. And I've gotten emotional a few times, but, you have to channel it, because you have to go on to the next live shot, and you have to tell the stories in a more somber tone.
Any live shots have unpredictable things happen during them? Crazy people behind you. I know there's always like wahoos behind you, running around.
There's more than a few instances. It tends to be when you're on the beach the day or two before a hurricane or tropical storm, because the sun is out, people haven't evacuated, or maybe there's never going to be an evacuation order, and they just like to get in the background and jump up and down. And usually it's not the kids, it's the adults, the grown-ups that do this, that jump up and down and wave and flail their arms. So it's not much you can do as long as they don't get in your space and start yelling things. That's happened a couple of times. Usually there's alcohol involved. but I've never felt physically threatened over all those live shots. Honestly, I can't remember. And we have security. People, will wander in the background. And I did have one time, I remember this, I was in Poughkeepsie, New York. This is a long time ago. And we were on the main highway, and I was showing the roadway, and somebody pulled over, stopped in the middle of the road and mooned us. Right. And I saw it on camera, but fortunately the photog had panned away from and was shooting down the street. So the incident, that part didn't make air. And a lot of times when I'm doing as lives, well, I should say a lot of times, but occasionally when I'm doing an as live, people will come up and start screaming and yelling, and I'll stop talking and I'll just look at them, guys, you're not on TV. This is not live. Let's do it again. And they go, oh, they're disappointed. So that's happened more than a few times in my career.
Can we talk about this? And I think it went viral back in 2018. Florence, when you were standing there having trouble standing up, you were windblown. And then two guys kind of casually walked behind you like they weren't affected at all. And I
was told this wasn't going to be brought up by my agent. Well, no, just kidding. We can talk about it because, I was, in fact, it was literally yards from where I was standing in the eye of Hurricane Floyd in 99. It was just one building over. So the wind was coming down the street. So it was getting channeled and then coming around the hotel. But I wasn't between two buildings, but it was coming down the street around the hotel that was behind me on screen right. And then these two gentlemen walked in the background, but they looked a lot closer than they were, and they weren't quite in the wind tunnel. And I was, just trying to hold my ground. And somebody saw, thankfully DVRs exist, and somebody put the clip on. Now, when they came back, one of them got knocked down by the wind. He went down on his knee or whatever. Something I remember that, but they only put the 20 seconds on, and that's the way it is. But you get a lot of comments. Why are you leaning? Why aren't you leaning into the wind gust, so you can stay straight? Well, the thing is when the wind's gusting, you're straight, and then each time you get a gust, you get, if it's, you're going to lean a little bit, but you got to lean downwind. Now, there's no way of knowing when the next gust is going to be when you want to lean into the wind. So my basic thing is just to stand my ground, and the winds that day were gusting, 40 to 40 something plus miles an hour, maybe a little higher, plus the channeling effect. And, the other thing is you try to lower your center of gravity too. That's the only time I went viral in that situation. I had another incident on NBC Nightly News where I lost communication to New York, and I screamed to Matt Safer again, my photographer, saying, I dropped my phone, I don't have, and they came in. So I was a minute or so out. So I quickly turned my back and took off my glove and tried to redial the IFB number.
Oh, that's the worst feeling.
Yeah, because we didn't have this was live view. We didn't have a sat truck. We didn't have a guy in the truck dialing it.
Yeah.
And then they came to me live on air, and the rumor was, and then, then all of a sudden within 20 minutes online, people were saying it looked like I was peeing on national TV.
Because you were turned around.
Yeah. And you can find this on YouTube. It's on my YouTube channel. And it looks like, all you see is my back, and I'm hunched over and trying to dial the phone. And then I get my glove back on and turn around, and Lester Holt throws it to me. And then it just became this one big 2-day. And then on the following Monday, this is Saturday evening in North Carolina, top of the mountain. And the funny thing is, I'd been doing live shots there all day, and I'd never had the phone call drop. And it dropped literally probably 45 seconds. And I don't know why, they came to me. I think maybe the audio operator, when I said I dropped my phone, he thought that I just dropped the phone in the snow, not that I couldn't hear the programming. So anyway, on Monday, Brian came on and did about a 1-minute explanation. And his great line was, contrary to popular belief, Mike Seidel was not trying to write his name in the snow, which was a great line. And anyway, that was another viral moment.
Well, if that's the worst you got, I think you're doing well.
It's live TV. Things sometimes happen. Sometimes the mic doesn't work. Sometimes the TV signal, whether it was a satellite truck or now the live view or the TVU backpacks that use cell phone cards, sometimes that drops. You don't have enough bandwidth, and then you have problems. So it's all part of being out there. It's usually pretty predictable, but sometimes things can go haywire, and sometimes things can go viral.
The Weather Channel used to not have as many live shots, and then it became like, 12 people are going out to cover this hurricane. So did you guys ever talk and like kind of exchange tips or ideas on how to cover it? Especially, some of the people like Stephanie or Jim who've been doing it a long time. Have you learned from each other?
Yeah, sure. I've been out probably more than anybody else there because Jim slowly backed off, and he now goes out for just major events. I've kept a Rolodex of live locations. So I know, and they're in my head. I know if I go to St. Louis, you want this shot, what kind of shot do you want? This is good for severe. This is good for severe and snow. So I've got this here. I've got it, on my computer. And so sometimes they'll call me and say, hey, where's a good place? And, have you ever been to, Rapid City? Where's a good place to go? Where's a good place to do a live shot? So we learn from each other. And, sometimes I'll see their location and make a mental note. Boy, that's a good spot. I need to keep that in mind if I'm ever covering a hurricane in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Just because I know you, I know that you like to go out to eat and you like good food. Any spots in the U.S. that have the best food? Like where would your favorite place be to go?
One of my favorite places on the coast is Mary Mahoney's in Biloxi, Mississippi. That is a fabulous restaurant. Fabulous restaurant. And a funny story is I'm flying Delta years ago, and there was a flight attendant, and her name was Mary Mahoney. And I looked at her and said, oh, there's a restaurant in Biloxi and has the same, and it's like one of the best seafood restaurants I've ever been to. She says, oh, my family owns that.
Wow.
She doesn't go like, yeah. And I see her occasionally when I go there. She's not flying anymore, but her dad really is running it now, but it's a great location. And I'm not getting paid to plug the restaurant, of course. But if you're in Biloxi, you need to try out Mary Mahoney's. A lot of well-known folks have gone there. I know Cantori's been there. Everybody that does live shots in and around Biloxi eats there because it is the place to go to. And you can't beat the seafood and the ambience. So, there's other places. What I try to do is when I'm out of town, try to eat someplace I can't eat here in Atlanta, North Georgia. And some of these places that are holes in the wall have the best food.
Yeah.
It may not look great on the outside, but on the inside, it's like a local hangout.
Right.
And you can really find some good food, some good seafood on the Gulf Coast. I kind of search around, and when I'm in a city or a town, try to eat someplace that's not someplace I can eat back here at home.
So you traveled a lot for a very long time. How did that affect you personally at all? Did it affect your personal life? Did you miss weddings? Did you miss birthdays? Did you miss events because you were covering a hurricane? And then what did your family think of your travel?
Well, sure. I missed a lot of things of my kids growing up, and now they're out of the house. They're, in their 20s. So I did miss birthdays. I missed weddings. In fact, to this date, I don't know if I've even been to 10 weddings in my life because I was always working out of town in Georgia. And I don't know. I've been here 32 plus years, and I've been to one wedding, I think. So yeah, I've missed a lot of family events. But on the other hand, I provided for the family, which is important. Putting groceries on the table, paying the bills. There's a trade-off in television because if you're a local TV, you're either getting up in the middle of the night, working till midnight, getting home at midnight, or you're working weekends. And it's the same with cable weather, cable news. Who works 9 to 5? Very few people. And so getting into the business, you have to realize that. And the family realizes what I do and what I get into, what I got into. So you have to deal with it. And the fact that I'm not on call now it's like a breath of fresh air because are you going to be home for dinner next weekend? I don't know. Are you going to be home by Friday? I don't know. So now I'm home.
Is Christina like, can you go away a little bit? Are you around too much now?
Well,
She's sick of you yet?
well, what they, these people that leave TV and say they want to spend more time with the family, and the old line is maybe you should check with your family first to see if they want you around more. But we keep busy here in North Georgia, and it's been nice to be around more and be able to have some more meals with, when the family's around, and it's certainly less stressful.
Okay, so let's talk about what's next for you. You now have all this time on your hands. Are you taking up any new hobbies? Are you doing anything interesting? What do you want to do in the future?
Well, my main hobby is my yard and my garden, and taking care of all the plants, the Zeon zoysia grass. We have a waterfall. I love that, sitting out there at night. We've got toads. The other night we had a blue heron fly in. We had goslings in the water, and then the parent, the geese, came out. So we've had all these interesting wildlife show up at the waterfall. So I keep busy in the yard, and I keep busy. I power walk a lot. Yesterday I did, I don't know, maybe 14,000 steps, which is over 5 miles. So I do a lot of power walking. Oh, a friend of my son's friend, I detail her car, cleaned it up. It took 5 hours. So I have time to do favors for folks. I don't have time to drive to Charleston and detail your car. So,
come on. It's not that far.
So as far as the work future, I'm hoping to freelance and get back out in the weather as we get into the summer. Not necessarily in June, but as we get into the meat of hurricane season. So we'll see what happens. See if someone wants to put me on the air as a freelancer. If not, then that'll be it. I'll be emeritus, or whatever they say.
I think people would be shocked to know how old you are, because I think most people think that you're a lot younger than you actually are.
Yeah, going to be 68. I don't know how old I look. Most people don't guess I'm that old.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's good to look younger.
Yeah, given all the time you've spent outside over the years, that's pretty surprising.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I would look younger if I hadn't been, all those short nights. I had a couple times where I would go 38 hours on 2 hours of sleep because I was up one morning and the next night I'm getting 2 or 3 hours, and then I go all day, and then I end up with at 6:30 with nightly news, but I had several, and like the 18-hour shift I did at Revere Beach. Could I do that now? I guess I could if it's snowing, 2 inches an hour, the winds are blowing 60 miles an hour. You have to remember, there's a lot of it. When you get into weather like that, there is a lot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And it keeps you going.
There's got to be a crash at the end, though.
Right. And once the snow ends, and then and the sun comes out, I'm done. I need to lay down. It was Irene back on the Outer Banks. And I started at 5 a.m. and I went till 8 p.m. that day. And I was out on the beach for a lot of that, dealing with those 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts, almost sustained winds, and walking down the beach and then having to fight the wind coming back to stay in the range. And I want to tell you, the next day, my quads and my calves were spent. And it's hard to imagine you're fighting that wind all day into the evening. And then the next day you wake up and you could feel it.
Is there anything else you want to share about your career or live shots or the upcoming hurricane season?
No, it's just I thank everybody for watching for so many years. When I was on the Weather Channel, it was always great to see people on planes and at the beach, and they would come up and be so friendly and nice. And thanks for their viewership. And we'll see if I end up back on TV before, say, August, before hurricane season hits.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Mike, congratulations on an awesome career, and you will be missed for sure. But I know you, and I know that you will stay in touch because you're very good at staying in touch.
Well, thanks, Emily. And it's great to finally be on your podcast after you were begging and pleading for so many months. Wobbling.
Be cool, man.
Well, the problem was, I'd go out to the mailbox every day, and I didn't see any change in the mail.
I'll tell you what, I'll start sending that when I start making some money on it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, send your donations down to Charleston.
Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Please follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes published every Tuesday. If you love today's episode, please share it with a friend. I'd also love you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let me know what you think of the show and give me ideas for future episodes. Thanks so much to Mike Seidel for joining me today. For the National Weather Desk, I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.